Any minute now, President Trump is expected to address the partial government shutdown and border security at the White House. Sources telling Fox News the president will offer to keep alive two programs for non-citizens in hopes of bringing Democrats back to the bargaining table. That's in exchange for $5.7 billion in border funding for the wall. We will bring you that announcement live as soon as it begins. Meanwhile, hello everyone and welcome to a brand new hour inside America's News Headquarters. I'm Arthel Neville.
And good to be with you as always, Arthel. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. A lot of news breaking. I'm Eric Shawn. The president's announcement comes as it is now day 29 of the partial government shutdown. Both sides are failing to see eye to eye on the deal to fully fund the government, as hundreds of thousands of federal workers still not getting paid. But the president about to offer the Democrats a possible deal. Garrett Tenney, live on the North Lawn of the White House with the very latest. So, Garrett, what do we expect the president to say in a few moments from now?
Well, Eric, we're told the president is going to lay out a proposal that would end the government shutdown by giving Democrats some of what they want on immigration in exchange for his border wall. Fox News has learned that the proposal will address DACA and TPS immigrants by granting temporary legal status to the 800,000 DACA recipients and extending the special protected status for more than 250,000 immigrants from countries such as El Salvador and Honduras who would otherwise be deported. Now, in exchange, the president would get his $5.7 billion for his border wall, along with $200 million for other border security measures, such as humanitarian aid, additional border agents, and drug interdiction programs. Now, we're told the president is hoping the Republican-controlled Senate will vote on his proposal this next weekend. That is important because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has not been willing to hold any votes on any proposals that the president has not signed off on. Now, if it passes there, and if House Democrats refuse to compromise, it would put House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in the position of rejecting a set deal that could reopen the government, which Republicans also believe could help them having leverage going forward in negotiations. Eric?
And Gary, what are the chances, do they think, of the proposal passing? The Senate and maybe eventually the House?
Well, at this point, it doesn't look good, Eric. The president even hasn't formally laid out his proposal at this point, but Democrats are already shooting it down. This past hour, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi released a statement saying, unfortunately, initial reports make clear that his proposal is a compilation of several previously rejected initiatives, each of which is unacceptable and in total do not represent a good faith effort to restore certainty to people's lives. It is unlikely that any of these provisions alone would pass the House, and taken together, they are a non-starter. Now, Democrats are also stressing that this proposal is not the product of bipartisan talks, and this is something that the White House is simply trying to force on them in terms of having a vote. Now, while this proposal may not go anywhere, it at least does reopen the discussion here between the two sides, because over the last week, those talks have largely stalled. Eric?
All right, Garrett, and there's the diplomatic room at the White House. We are awaiting the president any moment now to step up to that podium after he had his naturalization service that was quite stirring and inspirational in the Oval Office. Okay. Waiting for his appearance. Thank you.
And Eric, as we await the president's announcements, we're going to look at two of the programs that we are told the president is offering Democrats to bring them back to the negotiating table. One is DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It was created in 2012 by then Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano. It gives temporary status for minors under 16 years of age who arrive in the U.S. The program offers a 2-year grant to stay here. Each case is then reviewed separately, and recipients can be awarded extensions in 2-year increments. Now, these folks are not eligible for entitlements like food stamps, Medicaid, or Social Security. However, if they obtain a work permit, they become a taxpayer, which means by law, they are no longer barred from those entitlements. Now, in September 2017, the president announced that he is repealing that program, asking Congress to come up with a solution. This has not happened, and the program is now tied up in the courts, but no new applicants can apply. The president is also reportedly offering to keep alive temporary protected status, telling Fox News, for potentially hundreds of thousands of immigrants who reside in countries deemed too dangerous to return. Homeland Security can offer stays ranging from 6 to 18 months with extensions. Now, the latest government figures show 437,000 people from 10 countries are in the program, including from El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Guatemala. Joining me now, John Decker, who is the White House correspondent for Fox News Radio, also attorney. And we're waiting for the big man to speak. So when that happens, we're going to have to jump to that and cut you off, Mr. Decker. I'm sure you don't mind. And there is a look there at the diplomatic room where we are expecting the president to take that podium at any moment and address the nation. So meanwhile, John, is the president's offer that we've been reporting on that we're expecting him to announce, is that one that Democrats can afford to turn down?
Can they afford to turn it down? Their belief is right now they can. They feel that their base is fully behind what they have put forward in terms of what they want, which was, of course, reopening the government before any negotiations happen. We heard this again from the number 2 person in the U.S. Senate today, and for the Democratic side, Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois. He says that this proposal, as reported, just like Nancy Pelosi said in her statement, is a non-starter. They want to reopen the government before they have any type of compromise with President Trump.
And also, again, we're looking at this live shot here in the diplomatic room. The lectern's waiting for the president to step up and tell us what he's going to make this big announcement regarding immigration and perhaps an offer to get the Democrats back to the table to negotiate to end this government shutdown. And as you know, John, the Democrats have been adamant about not funding the president's wall. That's a part of this deal that he's going to offer momentarily, so we're told. So where do we go from here?
Well, that's a very good question, Arthel. It's as if the two sides, Republicans and Democrats, President Trump and congressional Democrats, are talking past one another because we already know what each side wants and what each side won't give. For Democrats, they will not give any funding for the border wall. And it seems as if the rank and file is right behind the leadership on the Democratic side in that demand. And as we know, as far as the president is concerned, he won't sign any legislation to reopen the government unless there is funding for that border wall. How much funding? $5.7 billion. Interestingly enough, Arthel, last year there was a similar type of deal that many Senate Democrats did support. It was for $25 billion in border security in exchange for a path to citizenship for those DACA recipients.
Let me put you on hold for a second. I'll get back to you. And we're going to pause for one moment to let our Fox stations join us. And this is a Fox News alert coverage of the president's speech on the shutdown. I'm Arthel Neville in New York. We are waiting the President Trump to take that lectern any moment there from the diplomatic room, where he is expected to make a major announcement as it pertains to immigration, in hopes, the president is saying, that will bring the Democrats back to the negotiating table to end this 29-day government shutdown. And here is President Trump.
Just a short time ago, I had the honor of presiding over the swearing in of 5 new great American citizens. It was a beautiful ceremony and a moving reminder of our nation's proud history of welcoming illegal immigrants from all over the world into our national family. I told them that the beauty and majesty of citizenship is that it draws no distinctions of race or class or faith or gender or background. All Americans, whether first generation or 10th generation, are bound together in love and loyalty, friendship and affection. We are all equal. We are one team and one people, proudly saluting one great American flag. We believe in a safe and lawful system of immigration, one that upholds our laws, our traditions, and our most cherished values. Unfortunately, our immigration system has been badly broken for a very long time. Over the decades, many presidents and many lawmakers have come and gone, and no real progress has been made on immigration. We are now living with the consequences, and they are tragic, brought about by decades of political stalemate, partisan gridlock, and national neglect. There is a humanitarian and security crisis on our southern border that requires urgent action. Thousands of children are being exploited by ruthless coyotes and vicious cartels and gangs. 1 in 3 women is sexually assaulted on the dangerous journey north. In fact, many loving mothers give their young daughters birth control pills for the long journey up to the United States because they know they may be raped or sexually accosted or assaulted. Nearly 50 migrants a day are being referred for urgent medical care. Vast quantities of lethal narcotics are flooding through our border and into our communities, including meth, cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl. Drugs kill 78,000 Americans a year and cost our society in excess of $700 billion. Heroin alone kills 300 Americans a week, 90% of which comes across our southern border. We can stop heroin. Illegal immigration reduces wages and strains public services. The lack of border control provides a gateway, a very wide and open gateway, for criminals and gang members to enter the United States, including the criminal aliens who murdered a brave California police officer only a day after Christmas. I've gotten to know and love angel moms, dads, and family who lost loved ones to people illegally in our country. I want this to end. It's got to end now. These are not talking points. These are the heartbreaking realities that are hurting innocent, precious human beings every single day on both sides of the border. As a candidate for president, I promised I would fix this crisis, and I intend to keep that promise one way or the other. Our immigration system should be the subject of pride, not a source of shame, as it is all over the world. Our immigration system should be the envy of the world, not a symbol of disunity and dysfunction. The good news is these problems can all be solved, but only if we have the political courage to do what is just and what is right. Both sides in Washington must simply come together, listen to each other, put down their armor, build trust, reach across the aisle, and find solutions. It is time to reclaim our future from the extreme voices who fear compromise and demand open borders, which means drugs pouring in, human trafficking, and a lot of crime. That is why I am here today, to break the logjam and provide Congress with a path forward to end the government shutdown and solve the crisis on the southern border. If we are successful in this effort, we will then have the best chance in a very long time at real bipartisan immigration reform. And it won't stop here. It will keep going until we do it all. The proposal I will outline today is based on, first and foremost, on input from our border agents and Homeland Security professionals, and professionals they are. They know what they're doing. It is a compassionate response to the ongoing tragedy on our southern border. In recent weeks, we have met with large numbers of Democrat lawmakers to hear their ideas and suggestions. By incorporating the priorities of rank-and-file Democrats in our plan, we hope they will offer their enthusiastic support, and I think many will. This is a common-sense compromise both parties should embrace. The radical left can never control our borders. I will never let it happen. Walls are not immoral. In fact, they are the opposite of immoral because they will save many lives and stop drugs from pouring into our country. Our plan includes the following: $800 million in urgent humanitarian assistance, $805 million for drug detection technology to help secure our ports of entry. An additional 2,750 border agents and law enforcement professionals. 75 new immigration judge teams to reduce the court backlog of, believe it or not, almost 900,000 cases. However, the whole concept of having lengthy trials for anyone who sets one foot in our country unlawfully must be changed by Congress. It is unsustainable. It is ridiculous. Few places in the world would even consider such an impossible nightmare. Our plan includes critical measures to protect migrant children from exploitation and abuse. This includes a new system to allow Central American minors to apply for asylum in their home countries and reform to promote family reunification for unaccompanied children, thousands of whom wind up on our border doorstep. To physically secure our border, the plan includes $5.7 billion for a strategic deployment of physical barriers, or a wall. This is not a 2,000-mile concrete structure from sea to sea. These are steel barriers in high-priority locations. Much of the border is already protected by natural barriers such as mountains and water. We already have many miles of barrier, including 115 miles that we are currently building or under contract. It will be done quickly. Our request will add another 230 miles this year in the areas our border agents most urgently need. It will have an unbelievable impact. If we build a powerful and fully designed see-through steel barrier on our southern border, the crime rate and drug problem in our country would be quickly and greatly reduced. Some say it could be cut in half. Because these criminals, drug smugglers, gangs, and traffickers do not stop at our border. They permeate throughout our country, and they end up in some places where you'd least expect them. They go all over our country. A steel barrier will help us stop illegal immigration while safely directing commerce to our lawful ports of entry. Many of these security ideas have been proposed by Democrats themselves, and all of them have been supported by Democrats in the past, including a physical barrier wall or fence. Furthermore, in order to build the trust and goodwill necessary to begin real immigration reform, there are two more elements to my plan. Number one is 3 years of legislative relief for 700,000 DACA recipients brought here unlawfully by their parents at a young age many years ago. This extension will give them access to work permits, Social Security numbers, and protection from deportation, most importantly. Secondly, our proposal provides a 3-year extension of temporary protected status, or TPS. This means that 300,000 immigrants whose protected status is facing expiration will now have 3 more years of certainty so that Congress can work on a larger immigration deal, which everybody wants, Republicans and Democrats. And our farmers and vineyards won't be affected because lawful and regulated entry into our country will be easy and consistent. That is our plan. Border security, DACA, TPS, and many other things. Straightforward, fair, reasonable, and common sense with lots of compromise. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has pledged to bring this bill to a vote this week in the United States Senate. Our proposal is not intended to solve all of our immigration challenges. This plan solves the immediate crisis, and it is a horrible crisis. It is a humanitarian crisis like we rarely see in our country. And it provides humanitarian relief, delivers real border security, and immediately reopens our federal government. If we are successful in this effort, then we can start the border project of remaking our immigration system for the 21st century. Once the government is open and we have made a down payment on border security and immigration reform starts to happen, I plan to convene weekly bipartisan meetings at the White House so we can do a finished product, a great product, a product that we can all be proud of having to do with that elusive immigration problem. Whatever we do, I can promise you this: I will never forget that my first duty and ultimate loyalty is to you, the American people. Any reforms we make to our immigration system will be designed to improve your lives, make your community safer, and make our nation more prosperous and secure for generations to come. Thank you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Path to citizenship, Mr. President. You supported a path to citizenship last year, Mr. President.
President Trump laying out what he says is a way for Congress to end the shutdown. Essentially, the president saying the immigration system has been broken for a very long time, and now we are living with the tragic results brought about by politics with a humanitarian and security crisis at the border. And he says, as the candidate, President Trump said that he promised to fix the crisis, and he intends to do so one way or another. Let's bring back in now John Decker. He's White House correspondent for Fox News Radio. And John, anything in particular stood out to you?
Well, the president is trying to find some sort of middle ground, clearly, between what the Democrats and Republicans have offered on both sides. The president offering that 3-year protection for those so-called dreamers, the DACA recipients. But what I've heard from Democrats is that doesn't go far enough. They want a pathway to citizenship for these 800,000 or so individuals who fall under the umbrella of DACA. So that will likely be a non-starter for the leadership. And in addition, we heard it once again from the president. He wants $5.7 billion for that border wall with Mexico. We know from both House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and also from the Senate leadership, Chuck Schumer, that this is a non-starter. They're not going to give him, they say, any money for a physical barrier between the U.S. and Mexico.
John Decker, I'm going to keep you standing by for me as I continue my conversation with you on the Fox News channel. But right now, I want to let everyone know that we're going to return our Fox programming to their regular coverage. So thank you for joining us here on the Fox News channel. I'm Arthel Neville alongside Eric Shawn in New York City. And we continue here on Fox News Channel with John Decker of Fox News Radio. John, we know that President Trump he listens very closely to his base. He really wants to please his base. But he also said there, as he was ending those remarks, he says that if they can get back to some sort of point of negotiation here with Congress and Speaker Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, that he would like to offer weekly bipartisan meetings. So is the president trying to, please his base on the one hand, but also trying to say, listen, country, I know you want this impasse to end, so I am going to do something about it by offering bipartisan meetings on a weekly basis?
This is absolutely an olive branch that the president is trying to put forward to Democrats. As we know, Arthel, last week there were no meetings scheduled whatsoever between congressional leadership, including the Democratic leadership in Congress, and the president. Nothing. And that's why this government shutdown lasted yet another week. And there's nothing on the schedule for this upcoming week. This is a good start in terms of meeting together with the other side, which opposes many of the things the president has proposed. Obviously, you can't find any kind of compromise unless you're talking to one another. And right now, Arthel, they're not talking to one another.
You know, John Decker, lots of things to go over, but a couple things that I want to point out. Of course, we know that the president, you know, he promised his base during the campaign that he was going to have that wall. He also said Mexico was going to build the wall. So, you know, the Democrats going to just keep hammering that, saying now you want the taxpayers to pay for this to the tune of $5.7 billion. Hold on to that for me. Also, as it's very difficult to try to fact check the president's remarks in real time, a couple things jumped out at me, especially when I heard the president say regarding some of the young girls coming across the border that the mothers are giving them birth control pills. Anything weird jumped out to you at all, John?
Well, there was that, Arthel, and also the claim that 1 out of 3 women that come across the border or try to come across the border are sexually assaulted. I haven't seen that figure coming from anywhere, actually, nor have I seen that anecdote that the president just addressed to us about birth control being given to women who are attempting to come across the border. Obviously, that would be concerning to just about anybody that's listened to the president just moments ago. But this is something that I haven't seen in any kind of reporting so far.
Well, back to the point at hand. Let's see if, in fact, President Trump has extended enough of an olive branch to get those folks in Congress back to the bargaining table and get the government reopened. John Decker, Fox News Radio White House correspondent, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Arthel.
One of the main points of the president's proposal we just heard, dealing with a 3-year extension of DACA. That's for the 700,000 Dreamers, as well as a 300,000 for the TPS, the Temporary Protective Service workers, as well as those with kids brought under 16 years old, as well as millions for humanitarian aid and other issues. And we're hearing from the Democratic side that this is inadequate. Doug McKelway, live in Washington with much more on this and reaction. Doug?
And Eric, there's something else which had jumped out to me in the president's speech, which I don't believe we have heard before. He said that Mitch McConnell is ready to take up legislation this week in the Senate reflecting these proposals that the president and his staff have made. You recall that we heard from Mitch McConnell dating back to before Christmas. In fact, we heard it a lot before Christmas and in the immediate aftermath of the Christmas holidays that Mitch McConnell would take up no legislation that did not stand a chance of garnering 60 votes in the Senate and which the president would not sign. So something has clearly changed here. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is going to take this up in the Senate. I don't see, based upon what we're hearing from Democrats, that it has any chance of passage. In fact, just reading from a statement in advance of this speech that Dick Durbin, the Democratic senator from Illinois, put out, which basically included all the facts that the president just laid out there. He sent out a statement which indicated the government must first open before Democrats consider that. This is not going to happen. He said he is not inclined to support the proposal as reported. He also said he's ready to sit down and discuss other options after the government is open. So I don't see where we're making any progress here. The motivation for Republicans and the president in letting Mitch McConnell take this bill up, and if in fact that does happen next week, as he suggested, may be to put the onus on Democrats, take it away from the Republicans, because you recall again in that meeting with Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, again before Christmas, the president said he would take the blame for this. I'm paraphrasing, but he said that the onus is on him. They want to put the onus back on Democrats now, and this may be a vehicle to do it. Eric?
One would think that Senator McConnell would not bring something to a vote that he is guaranteed doesn't have the votes for. You would think that he would. And then, as you said, it would be a challenge to Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic caucus, of course.
Yeah.
That could happen next week. Doug, thank you.
Yep.
Arthel?
Well, be sure to catch Fox News Sunday tomorrow for the latest reaction to the president's announcement. Vice President Mike Pence will join Chris Wallace along with House Majority Whip Democrat James Clyburn. Fox News Sunday airs at 2 and 6 p.m. Eastern here on the Fox News Channel. Be sure to check your local listings for times on your Fox affiliate. And we will be back more right here on the Fox News Channel with more coverage of the president's announcement after this.
Well, President Trump just moments ago laying out his proposal to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats to beef up border security and try and reform the nation's immigration system that he said has been a victim of, quote, national neglect. But now, will the Democrats agree to the president's plans? Let's bring in Kristen Hahn, a Democratic strategist and former chief political advisor for the Blue Dog Coalition, Alex Vogel, former deputy counsel to the RNC, former general counsel to the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Welcome to you both. Alex, let me start with you. The initial response to the Democratic side is the president's proposals are, quote, inadequate. The DACA DREAMer fix is only temporary, and he needs to reopen the government first. Is this a first step or a step backwards?
I do think it's an important first step, and frankly, I think they would have served themselves better to hold off a little bit. I know a lot of those statements came out as prebuttals. A couple of things. Number one, for the first time really since this entire wall shutdown conversation started, you actually saw the president, both with this speech and the earlier naturalization ceremony in the Oval that was very well done, really take control of the messaging, number one. Number two, I think the fact that the president referenced Leader McConnell and his desire and willingness to move something in the Senate shows you, based on the reporting about conversations that Leader McConnell had with the president, that he's definitely involved in driving this, which I think is productive. I don't necessarily think, in hearing the president's statement, I certainly didn't expect the Democrats to immediately come out and embrace it. But I think it's an important first step. And I think it shows the American public a willingness to negotiate, which we know everybody wants to see.
Kristen, do you think there is now room for compromise?
I mean, I think that there's always room for people to sit down, and like you said earlier, you have to sit at the table, you have to have a conversation if you're going to come to a compromise. However, the president, with his announcement today, I'm not really seeing what the compromise is here. He's asking, like you said, for a permanent wall and funding for a permanent wall that the Democrats don't support in return for starting negotiations on, how we deal with Dreamers over the long term. That's definitely not something that's going to be a starter for House Democrats.
Well, he's also offering basically the bare structure of what was already agreed on last February in that $25 billion deal. So, I mean, do you think that at least this is a starting point that can get the Democrats to come over to the president's side, or maybe have the president move as he has today toward the Democrats' view?
I think an honest starting point would be opening up the government again. I don't think the Democrats are going to come to the table until, he stops holding the federal government hostage. When you have Border Patrol agents trying to figure out how to make ends meet, this is not something that the Democrats are willing to do. And I'm a little confused about, he's saying having these weekly meetings, which is great, and I'm all for having, bipartisan meetings at the White House. I remember when I was on the Hill, President Bush invited us over quite often, which was great, and led to some bipartisan negotiations on different issues. But is he asking for the permanent funding for his wall now up front, and then looking at long-term negotiations on everything else later on? It just doesn't seem to be an honest way to go forward.
I mean, Alex, what about that? On one hand, you had the Democrats already supporting the fence. This is now a steel fence, frankly, not a wall. Back in 2006 with the Secure Fence Act, which the Democrats voted for. What about the potential of meetings and reopening the government first, as the Democrats want?
Look, at this point in the process, it is, we are so off the norm. Once we got to the State of the Union and other travel pullbacks, I don't see the president agreeing to acquiesce on funding for government until we have a comprehensive solution. I do think, while those meetings are important on an ongoing basis, the private meetings that are going to take place now between Leader McConnell, Speaker Pelosi, and others around these proposals from the president are really the ones that are important. Again, I'm not suggesting that they can politically or will accept what the president has laid out verbatim, but I think it clearly shows the American public a good faith starting point to these issues, and is a better sign than any we had leading up to today that the current stalemate was at least on a path to resolution. People would ask all the time, what is the pathway to get this done? And honestly, most of us didn't have one to suggest. At least now there's a framework that everyone can at least talk to and from, and I think that's constructive.
All right, Alex and Kristen, thank you. That'll be the last word. Now it apparently will move from the White House up to the Senate side of the Capitol and Senator McConnell, and see what he gets out of the Senate before he kicks it over potentially to the House. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Marthel?
Well, Eric, as the shutdown continues in Washington, a new migrant caravan crossing into Mexico, heading towards the U.S. border. All this as hundreds of migrants are arrested in Arizona after tunneling beneath the border wall there. Jeff Paul is live from our West Coast Bureau with the latest. Jeff?
Arthel, Border Patrol says while that barrier is steel, there is zero concrete footing to prevent digging. Authorities say the 376 people from Central America who were arrested were mostly families. They believe the migrants used short, shallow holes to dig under the steel barrier along the border just south of Yuma, Arizona. Investigators say they dug in 7 different spots 10 miles east of the San Luis border crossing. This is one of the largest groups ever arrested at one time for trying to illegally cross into the U.S., and some agents feel this is proof the border needs to be strengthened.
Here in Yuma, I mean, it was at one point one of the most secure points of our border after we put our barrier up. And now we're seeing that people are starting to exploit the weaknesses.
In New Mexico, a group of nearly 250 migrants were taken into custody after turning themselves into authorities at the Antelope Wells port of entry. Investigators say the group had been smuggled into the U.S. and was made up of mostly people from Central America, including many families with small children. Now in California, at the San Diego sector, in total, Border Patrol says it has made 2,600 caravan-related arrests so far. Arthel?
All right. Thank you very much, Jeff Paul. And we're going to bring in John Jordan. John Jordan is a former Navy intelligence officer and overseer at Stanford's Hoover Institute. John, always good to have you. Very, very big day happening here with listening to the president make his announcements regarding immigration and his plan to try to get the Democrats back to the negotiating table. So what is your forecast as to what happens next?
The arc of President Trump's presidency changed today. Seldom has this president used the primary power of the presidency, and that is the ability to make your case to the American people. Today he did so in a vivid and human way, and with his offer and the bill to be taken up on the Senate has transcended now the ugly tit-for-tat politics on Capitol Hill. The messaging and the onus is now on the Democrats. Nancy Pelosi has to deal with the far-left elements of her caucus. She has to deal with far-left lobbyist groups who want nothing less than total war with Donald Trump, and square that with the almost 3 dozen conservative members of her caucus that won in conservative districts. So the president's playing basketball on her half of the court right now. So you're going to see a lot of stress and a lot of hand-wringing on the Democrat side of Capitol Hill.
But, you know, John, there are some who are saying, listen, the president should reopen the government first, then entice the Democrats back to the negotiating table. Because, you know, as this all plays out, you have 800,000 federal workers, plus their families, who are working without pay or no pay. So, you know, is this really the way to handle this at this point? I mean, it's day 29 of the longest government shutdown ever.
The president doesn't really have a choice here. Were he to do so, the Democrats would refuse to negotiate, just as they have in the past. This is unfortunately the only way the president can keep it in the headlines, keep it in the media, and have the ability to make his case to the American people in a compelling way while this story is really dominates the media. Without that, the Democrats will stonewall, obstruct, and the far left elements of the Democrat Party, the open borders crowd, will continue to drag their feet and have their way.
And John, last night, President Trump tweeted, he says, I will be making a major announcement concerning the humanitarian crisis on our southern border and the shutdown. So, John, as you see it in your analysis, is there a humanitarian crisis at the southern border? Is there a security crisis at the southern border? You just heard Jeff Paul report on people digging below this steel fence to gain entry into the U.S.
The humanitarian crisis begins at our southern border, but it permeates throughout our society. As the president pointed out, the inflow of drugs throughout all parts of the United States. Think of the human suffering that's causing. Yes, they're coming through the southern border. Yes, they come through ports of entry. But we have, as the president adequately and beautifully described, sex trafficking, people being raped and hurt, as well as the enormous scourge of fentanyl and opioids coming across the border. So it starts there, but it's finding its way into America's heartland, this humanitarian crisis.
Well, you know, I'm sure the fact checkers will be, looking into some of the stats that the president offered during his speech.
Oh, yes.
Really quickly, though, reportedly this offer was largely influenced by talks between Vice President Mike Pence, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and the president's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner. What are we to make of this? What's the president's part of the deal?
Well, the president's part is offering a 3-year extension of DACA as an entree to negotiations to a global immigration settlement. What's interesting and significant here is that Mitch McConnell and Vice President Pence were in that room, which means almost conclusively that the Majority Leader McConnell has the votes in the Senate to pass it. Now, if it passes the Senate, then the onus and all of the pressure is then on the House and Nancy Pelosi to get this through. And can she deal with the various factions in her caucus to stand her ground? I don't think so. 63% of the American public want a compromise, according to an NPR poll this week. So I think that they're going to see some cracks in Democrat solidarity now.
John Jordan, we have to leave it there. Thank you.
Well, meanwhile, a second summit is being planned between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. That is set for next month. But to know, despite the recent diplomacy with North Korea, a new Pentagon report says that nation continues to pose a, quote, extraordinary threat to the United States. So, do you think Kim Jong-un will really scrap his nukes?